LaxFactor podcast. And we are live here. What is up, college lacrosse fans? I am back from the depths of sickness. I had myself a man cold last week, so I missed last week's live stream. This week, I got my second COVID vaccine, and I felt like absolute hot trash yesterday. But today, I'm feeling good. I'm vaccinated. I got my tiger blood coursing through my veins. I got an Easter thing here today. But more importantly, we have a boatload of lacrosse to talk about. So we're going to do something different this week. Rather than me looking at my screen, peeping questions, and doing all that crap, I'm just going to do the full-on gig. I'm going to rip through all the crap that I want to talk about, which includes the Syracuse-Duke game, Richmond and High Point, Hofstra Fairfield, and then we'll talk a bunch about the games that are going to be played today. I'll talk about the games that have already been played first, hit the questions up, and then we'll get back to talking about the games that are coming up, and we'll make it more of an open forum from there. But holy crap. The game, the Syracuse-Duke game, number 4 Cuse against number 2 Duke on Thursday night, and this game ended up playing out as advertised. It was crazy from start to finish. The flow overall, a little bit unexpected in the sense that Duke jumps out to a two-goal lead. I was quiet, and I'm sitting here watching this in the basement by myself. I'm sipping on some Fiddlehead IPAs. They jump out to a 2-goal lead. I'm like, oh, crap, I hope that doesn't go this way the whole time. And I posted my only tweet of the entire game, which was that if Syracuse can't shore up this off-ball crap because those first 2 goals were assisted, then it's going to be a long day. And then I didn't tweet again the rest of the game as I watched it. Then Syracuse, they come out, they score 3 unanswered, take a 3-2 lead. I was hyped. I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm clapping really loudly. I'm sitting here thinking, man, I wish I had some more beer right now. And I ran up and I got myself another beer and kept drinking. And then Duke tied things up and it went back and forth until it was 5-5. So at 5-5, as a Syracuse fan, you're like, yo, this is what we were hoping for. This is going to be a great game. Giddy up. And then things went off the rails for a while. We see Duke score 7 unanswered goals. It was somewhere between the 11-minute mark left in the second quarter and about the 5-minute mark left in the second quarter that Duke goes on a 7-goal run. It's 12-5 at one point in that second quarter, and I was quiet, and I was very sad after that. And the worst part about it was some of you who know me privately, or who we go back and forth and we chat via Facebook chat, I sent to anyone that I thought might care even a little bit. I sent a video of my son last weekend playing lacrosse in the backyard with my daughter. It may have been the weekend before that. So my son's starting to take an interest in lacrosse. So I'm getting excited. So my son was watching a good chunk of the first half of this game with me before it was his bedtime. And here's my 7-year-old kid watching a game where I'm just totally dejected. And I'm that fan that you don't necessarily want to watch games with, because as soon as things go off the rails, especially the Giants, if things go off the rails for the Giants, that means the Giants lost and it's over with. At least with Syracuse, Cuse can go down by 5 goals and you're not sweating it too bad yet. But 12-7 or 12-5 against Duke felt like this is done, where it's over. I was absolutely dejected and pissed, and I'm trying to be cool because my son's just chirping me in my ear like, hey, Dad, what about this and what about that? And wait, who's this guy? And which one's our goalie? And he's asking me all these questions, and I'm trying to answer him, and I'm trying to be a nice, loving father in those moments, but I really just wanted to be a big baby and, cry in my beer. So that was funny, and that was an interesting dynamic to get through the first half with. Then those 2 goals at the end, we end up scoring those 2 goals at the end of the second half. I think Scanlon had one. I feel a little bit better at 12-7 because that's your 5-goal game that I've repeatedly seen Syracuse come back from. I remember we took my father to his first game at the Dome a couple years ago. They were playing Hopkins, and they went down 5-0 against Hopkins. I think last year they were down 5-0 or down by 5 at one point against Army. Cuse comes back from 5-goal deficits. A lot of teams do. So 12-5 or 12-7 at the half. I'm not feeling too terrible. And but I was still feeling like 12-7 at the half, like it was going to end up being an L. I was hopeful that Cuse could make it a little bit interesting, but I was still thinking that's probably the margin by the end of the game. Even if Syracuse can even things out and play better, I didn't see them climbing back out of that deficit. So, the second half was not nearly as ugly for Syracuse. The face-off game was terrible all game long. And I did hear a lot of people talk about how, hey, Varello saved us, and it was probably about, I think, what was it? I got Mike. You had hit me up, Roosteen. He's not watching right now, but I know he hit me up talking about how the face-off games killing us, and Varello saved us. And while you're watching the flow of the game, it seemed like it. But even with that, Varello won 7 of 22 over the course of that game. So, I mean, yes, he came in and he won some key faceoffs, especially in that third quarter where I think they evened him up 3-3 in terms of the faceoffs over that third quarter. That gave us a lot more possessions. What really saved our asses, though, was over that third quarter, the defense stepped up big time. We went from not stopping anybody. Duke was scoring unassisted goals, assisted goals. They were kind of beating our defense up totally in that first half. And in the second half, they forced, the first half, I think they forced like 4 or 5 turnovers. Second half, Syracuse forced 6 turnovers in the third quarter, 6 turnovers in the second quarter. So that's really what helped Cuse climb back. It was a mix of Varello coming in and winning some face-off draws, even though the game didn't finish well and we still got smoked overall. He did a better job. More importantly, we forced 12 turnovers over the course of that second half because of our defense, and it was really just a mix of the defense coming out, whereas before, they got beat to the goal. They got beat by a cutter. They didn't really contest the shot after that. In the second half, guys were diving. Guys were trail checking. Guys were never giving up on the plays. And that ended up making all the difference. Now, to get into it, stories of this game, Michael Sowers. I mean, 3 goals, 3 assists, including the game-tying assist and the game-tying goal in the fourth. This is what you play for. This is what Tewaaraton candidates do. This is what Player of the Year candidates do, is they play huge at the end of big games, or they just play big in general through those big games. I still don't think Duke's taking full advantage of his skills. One thing I want to make clear that I think got lost in translation in last week's episode where I talked about Gray leading the Tewaaraton. I am a firm believer that the best player in the country, hands down, 0 question at all, is Michael Sowers. Here's Michael Sowers. Here's Chris Gray. Then you got your Rayfusses and your Bernhardts and things like that. And I'm not sure how far below Gray, Rayfuss, and Bernhardt are. I think they're a little bit, maybe Rayfus is below that, but Bernhardt's probably right in there. So I think Sowers is the best player in the country, hands down. I don't even think it's close. I think if you would take Chris Gray over Sowers in a draft, if we said, hey, let's draft these teams, and you were the dude that took Chris Gray first, you made a big mistake. Not a big mistake, but a big mistake. You didn't take the best player in the country. These are facts. I'd take Gray second for sure if I was able, and those two would play incredibly well together. But the reality is more than half of Chris Gray's goals are assisted. Less than that for Sowers. Sowers primarily gets his points by dodging and by feeding, and Gray does rely on the system a lot more overall than Sowers. Now, it's going to sound like I'm dumping on Gray. Anybody would take Gray still. Gray is still one of the best players in the country, one of the best attackmen we've seen in a long time. But he does do the bulk of his damage, or a lot of his damage, off ball, whereas Sowers is that true QB. You need a game one at the end. If you could pick between these two, you'd be crazy if you didn't take Sowers. Analytics supports that across the board. Even the eye test, I think, for like the coaching-minded guys, I think would agree with that. So I still don't think Duke is feeding the beast like I think that we'll see them doing by the end of the season, and I think it's by design. What good is Sowers putting up 100-plus points and walking his way to an easy Tewaaraton if it costs them the development of some of their other players, the development of that offense as a whole? And that's one reason I think that you've seen why Duke has done so well is Coach D. He doesn't fuck around. Overall, man, that dude cares more about developing his players and as men as he does about winning lacrosse games. And the byproduct of being like that and sticking to your laurels the way that he does is you end up winning a lot of games. You end up being a coach that players love to play for. And that's why, yes, the school helps. But I feel like wherever Danowski went, he would have this, almost this level of success because of the coach that he is. So the moral of the story, the very thing that could cost Sowers the Tewaaraton in the end, which is a lack of points compared to Gray, because I think that those two are the ones at the top. I think that's also the thing that makes Duke, in my mind, still the favorite to win the title, is that they are developing a team beyond trying to get this dude that cheddar in those singles. And then hold my horses. What we saw in the ACC, too, is that this is not a Duke UNC race. You even saw Anish at one point in that game say, so it was 12-7 or 12-5, and he's like, so are we now seeing the separation here in terms of the ACC? Next thing you know, Cuse is storming back in the second half and making a game of it right down to the final second. So one thing, while I'm saying this all, that I still think it's a Sowers Gray race. What happens if Cuse wins the title? I still think those guys get it. But I mean, if you have a guy like Stephen Rehfuss, who's tearing it up for Syracuse right now, who's put this team on his back offensively, and you have them end up winning the title, does that even play? Do you end up with a guy who right now is definitely a dark horse for the Tewaaraton? He's on the watch list, but he's even a dark horse, I would say, to make the finalist list, the final five. If Cuse wins a title, what's that do for a guy like Rayfuss's chance to win this? I still think if Duke and North Carolina both lose in the semis, I think it goes to Sowers. If Duke and North Carolina play each other in the finals by chance and Duke wins, it goes to the winner. If Duke or North Carolina or Maryland win the finals, that guy, the player on the team that wins the finals, is going to get to Tewaaraton. But what happens if none of those three win it and, Cuse wins it and they have some guys that are deserving? I don't know how it'll play. The reality is, what I was meaning to say in that last episode was that I think that the committee is going to give it to Gray in the end if both teams stop at the same point and one of them doesn't win the national title, because they have proven they love the media hype, they love the points, and they really do love the flash. And I was talking to David Sowers about it, and he said that's, Mike doesn't play with flash because I wouldn't let him play with flash. His father was his coach, and his father beat the flash out of him, and what the byproduct ended up being one of the most fundamentally sound lacrosse players we have seen in a long time. I mean, this kid has Mike Powell levels quickness, Mike Powell level skills, Mike Powell level ability to dodge and control the rock, not turn the ball over, put up points, but he does it without the flash that comes with that. So that to pretend it doesn't hurt him in the eyes of an ignorant media, it would be not being truthful. So that was really what I was trying to convey in that. I am team Mike Sowers still in this, and I think that if I was a coach, I'm still no-brainer. I'm taking Mike Sowers in the draft for the PLL first, no matter what my needs are. I'm taking the best guy. But so that's me waxing nostalgic on that. Another key in this game, Stephen Rehfuss, 3 goals, 3 assists, including 2 goals and 2 assists over the second half as they climb back into this game. A lot of people started up the tired old bullshit of people are forgetting about Rehfuss and people are fronting on Rehfuss and blah, blah, blah. And I might even say it sometimes, but I don't mean it like truly I'm bringing some kind of revelation to you all that you guys don't know about this guy, the Stephen Rehfuss guy. We all know about Stephen Rehfuss. I've been saying all year, Stephen Rehfuss is the key to Syracuse's success. If he doesn't tear it up, Cuse doesn't make it back to the Final Four. That's a fact. They needed Stephen Rehfuss to be the All-American Savage that we all were hoping he was going to be after his breakout sophomore year. And right now, that dude is delivering. 15 goals, 16 helpers, 31 points over 6 games. That's good for 5.16 points per game, right up there at the top of the ACC, hanging with Sowers and Gray overall. I mean, he's this team's leader, and if Cuse is going to have a shot at the Final Four, it's going to have to go through this kid. I couldn't be more pleased to see him trashing on everybody as he has so far. I was just so happy to see that backhanded goal that he had coming up that right side late. That was just an absolute thing of beauty. So Rehfuss is proving now he can do everything again. Last year, he was like ridiculously assist heavy. This year, 15 and 16. It doesn't get any more 50-50 than that, and we're going to ride this kid's back to the Final Four, hopefully. Another story of the game, I'm talking a lot about Cuse because obviously I love Cuse, but I'll get back here into the Duke praises. Defensive adjustments by Cuse. Duke came out and played I'd say defensively, a pretty complete game outside of, they kind of faltered a little bit down the second half, but off defensively in that first half, Cuse looked absolutely terrible. 4 of Duke's first 6 goals were assisted, so Cuse adjusts for the second quarter, and then 2 of Duke's next 5 goals were unassisted. I mean, I don't even know what that stat was. That's like gibberish right there. But coming out in the third quarter, they stopped letting Duke score and instead started forcing turnovers. They were playing far more aggressive overall, sometimes even desperate, where in the first half, if they got beat, it was just like guys were content letting the help come and then trying to get back to the hole. In that second half, if they got beat, dudes were trail checking, diving, doing anything they could to just get a stick on them, not giving up on the play. So they played much better defense in that second half, and the result was they held the best team in the country, the second best offensive team in the country in terms of efficiency, to 3 second-half goals. That was an incredible adjustment that Cuse made. And it's not like they won that many more faceoffs. I mean, they won a couple more faceoffs in that second half than they did in the first half. What happened was they played better defensively. Drake Porter played well the whole game. So we're going to talk about both goalies now, too. Porter, I think he proved he's the more consistent keeper. over the course of the evening. However, Adler proved that if called upon, he is fully capable of helping win games for Duke here. I mean, he played huge over the course of that second half. And then you say, like, well, I mean, how good did he play? Q outscored Duke 7-3 in that second half, but Adler made 7 saves in that second half, and every single one of them was key. Right down to that last save was key in helping Duke secure that victory. A lot of chatter about that last shot. I think that last shot goes off the outside of the pipe and it doesn't go in. I don't think it was going in. I think it was a valiant-ass effort by Rayfus, but to pretend that Adler made a save that saved the game, even though it looked kind of like that, he had to be where he was and he had to save that. I don't think that shot was going in. I think if you watch the trajectory of that ball, it looked like it was going to hit the pipe and go back behind the cage and maybe even just hit the back of the net. But either way, Adler proved that he can hang with the best of them. He proved that he can hang in these high-profile games, and without him stepping up his game as he has over the course of this, like he got benched the first game of the year. Kid has come back, though, and has played huge. Am I, like, making the camera go out of focus as I do that? I got to stop that. Anyway, without the game he had, Duke doesn't win that game if he didn't stand on his head to a degree, and I say stand on their heads. Both goalies were under 50% in this one. Which is rare for both of them, but what the heck were you going to do? I mean, it's Duke Syracuse here. You're going to have a little bit more of a rough outing than average when you're playing against the teams like these two are playing against. And some of you are going to be like, how the hell have you not talked about Naso yet? Jake Naso, I think it's Naso. It's his turn now. He didn't start the season as Duke's number one faceoff guy. I don't know if it was injury or just he's young. He's a freshman. But, man, this kid is going to be a star. Don't let the 65.5% fool you. That's a great stat, but some of us have kind of been desensitized. If you're not winning 70% of your faceoffs, you're not the best in the country. Like, because guys like T.D. Erlin and Trevor Baptiste kind of spoiled us in terms of hanging right under 70, if not over 70. But this kid this kid's crazy. This kid's played really well. He hasn't lost a faceoff battle yet all year since becoming their number one faceoff guy. He's won at least 50%, if not better, of his faceoffs every single game since he's been playing. And the only one that he was at 50% was he was 2 of 4 against High Point because they were putting the hurt on High Point. So Duke just started rotating faceoff guys in all willy-nilly. So that's the only game that he was at 50% all year. Every other game he was above 50%. This kid is legit. So keep watching him. And his 24 of 32, 24 out of 32 draws, that dominance that he had over a very capable Cuse unit, that's not the end of his story. And he's got UNC coming up on Thursday. So, I mean, if he can repeat that dominance and smoke UNC like he did Fopp and Varello, giddy up. Duke probably wins that game as well. Now, Duke's defense, very formidable. I think Duke overall, when you talk about who they have to play and who their defense has to perform against, I think Duke has the best defensive team in the country overall. I was surprised at how well their short stick D mids played. I was surprised at how well their LSMs played. Their poles played about as I expected. You had a lot of people, even in the telecast. I still marvel at this. Anybody that says that JT Giles Harris is the best cover guy in the country, you're not really paying attention as closely as you probably should. He's not. I don't think any real coach is sitting there looking at the scouting report and saying, oh, man, we got to avoid JT Giles Harris like AIDS in the 1980s. It's just not the way that it goes here. Am I going to get in trouble for saying that? Making an AIDS reference here? Maybe. We'll see. That's the problem with live streams, man. You can't edit stuff out. So he's not the premier cover guy. I still think that JT Giles Harris is the best defender overall in the country, but he is not a lockdown defender. And they even said that, I think Anish said it at one point in the telecast, that best cover guy in the country. No. And someone in one of the comments of my video from last week had said, I think you're overestimating what Rayfus is going to do. Rayfus is going to get shut down by JT Giles Harris. And I said to the guy, JT Giles Harris isn't going to cover Rayfus. I forget what the name of the dude that Duke puts on all of the other team's best players, but it's not JT. It's crap, I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, he doesn't guard any given team's number one guy. He's the guy that they typically put on the best off-ball guy, and they let him kind of play in the middle of the field, and he kind of anchors that defense. It's rare, I think, so far this season that you would see him on their number one guy. He didn't guard Asher Nolting. I think Duke played them. He didn't guard Nolting. I'm going through and trying to figure out who he did guard. But, yeah, no, he didn't guard Rayfus. The other dude did. He guarded Hiltz, and they were trying to make it sound like, that's how much they respect Hiltz. No. It's just how the matchups work. He's not the best on-ball defender that this team has, or even if he is the best on-ball defender that this team has, he's not a shutdown guy enough that you would end up wasting him there when you can keep him in the middle of the field where he's got to stick up, he's anchoring the D, he's calling out the slides to help, he's picking passes that come across the middle out of the air. So don't take that as a knock against JT. I'm really just knocking everybody who makes bold claims that this is the best cover guy in the country. No, this is the best overall defender in the country. He is not. I wouldn't even put him probably in the top 5 of the best true, like, one-on-one, I'm going to take you to the rack now, let's see what you can do to me. I wouldn't even necessarily put him in the top 5. He is, maybe because the Ivy's not playing, and one or two of those guys that I would put in that top 5 are Ivy League defenders. So maybe this year he does make the top 5 of cover guys, but I'd put him right out there on the edge of that top 5. So chirp me in here if you want to. Not in a, like a, hey, call me, I'm legitimately, if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments here why, and we'll get to that here when we're done. So I wasn't surprised with what Rayfus did. I thought the Syracuse attack were going to hold up well against this Duke defense, and they did. I was actually more worried about the Cuse midfield because I felt like Duke's short stick D mids had been playing solid, and my worry with Syracuse always comes down to in a game where they lack possessions like they did against Duke, because Naso's just an absolute psycho at winning draws, that Desko has this weird thing that I despise where he plays that second midfield line of Syracuse's almost equal to the first line. If you watch this game, Duke does not play their second midfield line, especially in a tightly contested game like this. They don't play them equal. You get that first line burn as much as you can. And even into the second half, Desko was still given that second line. At one point in the second half, between a bad Quinn shot, a Seabold turnover, that second midfield line turned the ball over between shots and actual turnovers 4 times in a row as they were on the field, as the first line was starting to get in their groove and starting to play well. So that's something I think that Desko, it's my one knock against Desko. You have the fire Desko crowd. I am not in that camp. I do have the Desko has to stop this. I don't get it. I understand you want to develop that second line, but as a coach myself, who's way below, like who the hell am I compared to this guy? Even to me, I'm insulting myself. Even to a lowly fellow like me, I know that I'm not alone, and I'm not the only person watching this game saying, why in the F is that second line on the field right now this late into the third quarter when the first line literally just got a 20-second run, scored a goal, and boom, second line's right back out on the field when you could have run that first line more and more and more. I feel like in a game like this, if Desko had played that, especially where the first half they weren't getting enough possessions, I think that first line barely got tired. They barely got winded. I think if you play them more in the first half, this game goes a different way. Cuse ends up maybe making up for that faceoff deficit a little bit more effectively. But in the end, the mark of a good team, like a team like Duke, is that despite getting a lead, giving that lead up, they still came up with stops at the end of that game. They forced those last 3 possessions by Syracuse were atrocious as they tried to tie that game up, and it was atrocious because Duke played really solid defense and because Adler was tough in goal. So that's the mark of a good team. You win these games, you even where you falter at some point in the game, you forget about that previous possession and you get your shit back together again and you play well, and the Duke defense definitely did that. And Syracuse's defensive midfield is shaky. If you're not named Dearth, you're not playing very good lacrosse. I felt like 4-3 there. I always Avalis. I felt like he played better in the second half. But I always mispronounce his name, but Oladimonier, number 35. He played terrible in the first half. If you paid attention, you would see that a bunch of the goals that were given up, granted everybody was getting beat in that stretch, but defensively he often got beat badly at the midfield, resulted in a couple of goals. He got beat off ball a couple of times. He's actually been playing pretty rough, and I don't know what changed in the second half. I didn't notice him playing as poorly, so maybe he picked it up and played a little bit better as well, but so far I'm being chirped by people telling me, "Hey, look, watch number 3-5. He's hurting Syracuse on the defensive midfield so far." And he has been for a couple of games now in terms of just getting beat if you pay attention. So let's watch that because he's capable. He's athletic. He's young. So he's got a lot of time to improve. But that was something in this game that I noticed right off the bat was when Duke went on that run 3 times, 3 of those goals, I would say. I didn't watch back the tape, but I made a note that 3 of those goals during that 7-goal run seemed to be off of him getting beat by someone. And that's never good. So, and I don't like the Cuse short stick D mid matchup against UNC and their step down shooters either. So that's something to watch. Next up for Duke is UNC here on Thursday. So that's going to be a big one. Another game that was played. And all right, so we're up to a bunch of viewers. We got some questions here. Let's talk about it first. Let's see if your questions here tie into this. That call at the end of the game when JT Giles Harris got stripped, but they allowed Duke to keep the possession. That was a killer since they eventually scored a goal on that same possession. Brian Walker puts that in. And I don't know what that call was. What was that call? Because we were all sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, Cuse is going to get the ball back. They end up giving it to Duke almost as if it was like an inadvertent whistle or something weird like that. I don't know what the deal was there. And I did hear people chirping the refs, but I didn't hear the Cuse staff freaking out like crazy. And I do remember thinking like, shit, that's bad. Because they did score that goal off the end. So if you know what that call was, Brian, put that in the comments. Kid Trunks, Richmond over High Point, 17-10. That really surprised me. Did not surprise me at all. I'm going to talk about that game next there, Kid Trunks. So hang tight. If Cuse cleaned up their face-offs and played less sloppy in the start, they'd have a real shot at winning everything. I agree, Kid Trunks. Cuse, their face-off crew, I thought they were going to be sitting in the area 65 to 70%. Already between the two of them. I liked their wing play. And then once they moved Kennedy back up to the wings, I was like, giddy up, man. We're going to start scorching faceoffs. And they have underperformed, but I think they'll clean that up. We've got at least experienced dudes there. So that's my hope. How about that BS failure to advance call on Duke when Duke clearly was over the line? 31 A-Rob. I was waiting for someone to say that. And I was watching Twitter to see if anyone mentioned that. What most people don't realize is that clock is a little bit behind. The clock that you're seeing on your screen, if you notice, Duke didn't chirp it at all, and nobody fought it. Like, they literally just dropped the ball and got back on defense. It's because the clock you're seeing on your screen has a very slight delay. So I've seen this actually happen a couple of times where it was like, wait a minute, he got it over with 60, at the 60-second mark or at the 61-second mark, but they called it a delay of game and gave it back to the other team. And then I was kind of thinking like, okay, that is because there is that delay, because you figure they got a camera or some kind of software on that clock. And and there's almost always a little bit of a delay. So what I suspect happened, especially based on the reaction of the Duke coaches, they were obviously didn't make it over the line. And in the TV broadcast, it just makes it look like it, because even if it was a half a second delay in that case, that ref is just looking, boom, do I see 60 at the moment that he's crossing the line, and if he does, it's over. It's a delay of game. So I think that was probably the right call, and I think the Duke coach is not flipping their shit at the end of it probably indicates that it was as well. Brian Walker, okay, this is what I was waiting for. You're dead wrong on JT. Shutdown defender is overused. He's the best in the country. I'm not wrong. I just said that, Brian. Maybe you didn't hear it, but I did say he is not the best shutdown cover guy in the country, but he is the best defender in the country. I still believe that. The best all-around defender. He can do everything. He can cover. You could put him on another team's best player, and he is certainly going to hold his own and do well. More importantly, though, what he does as a veteran leader, as a talker, as a coach on the field, getting guys ready, making sure we've got 2-3 slides deep, and more importantly, being the help. Often you will see that he's the guy that ends up going, and I think that's why they like to put him on the off-ball guys, because they end up having the best defender on the field being the first guy to slide, and he is a mean dude. So I was not wrong. He is a very good on-ball defender. I would call him elite, because I'd still put him in the top 10, top 15 of on-ball defenders. But to me, he's the number one defender in the country. He should be the number one defender taken in the PLL draft. He is literally a prototypical PLL defender. He can do everything. That's what they look for in the PLL. So I'm not wrong, and I would appreciate a retraction of you saying that I'm wrong. Just kidding. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I just don't think that he is the best cover guy necessarily, even on that team, maybe. And I always forget who the dude is that they put on everybody's number one Dodger, but that dude's legit too. I mean, they have two polls that I would put right up there with the best of them in JT and the other guy, whoever the hell it is that I'm forgetting his name right now. I'm going to have to look it up. And then the number 33 there, he's been playing pretty well. So, I mean, Duke has a great defense, but more importantly, Duke plays really good team defense. So I agree with you. I think he's the best defender in the country. I just think it's crazy when people say he's the best cover guy in the country. That's not true. Leland, Dami looked, I don't know who he's talking about. Dami. Oh, I think he's talking about number 35 for Syracuse. Leland, who are you talking about? Are you talking about number 35 for Cuse? Because he looked a little sluggish. Oh, okay. And he does, and me and Walker, we don't have to arm wrestle now to see who's right. He says he does see what I'm saying, and I do totally agree with everything that Brian said. So I hope he agrees with me. All right, back to the next game that I know that Kid Trunks wants to talk about. High Point 10, Richmond 17. So first off, I cannot believe the number of people that thought High Point was going to win this game just because of Asher Nolting. I know that Mr. Moneyline on Twitter was saying how High Point's going to win by a margin because Richmond doesn't have anyone on the team that could guard Nolting. I don't remember what I know I picked Richmond in my own picks, and I figured Richmond was going to win. I was surprised at the 17-10 spread. I figured Richmond by 3-5 or something like that. But if you thought High Point was going to roll in this one or even win this game because of Asher Nolting, you have not watched Richmond. I think the big game for me that woke me up to Richmond's defense being one of the best defenses overall in the country in terms of team defense was the UNC game. UNC had been just beating everybody up, putting up mad points on Denver and everybody else. And when they played Richmond, Richmond did something differently at that point that no one else had done. They pressed UNC everywhere. You can't, and I think that's kind of the blueprint that we're going to hope to see, or at least that's the blueprint for the ACC teams to beat UNC or to hang with UNC is press them. You cannot give these guys space as Dodgers. You can't let them beat a guy and then have to slide quickly. So by coming out and pressing teams like Richmond or like UNC or even a team like Duke with Sowers, Cuse tried to do that too, where Cuse came out and was pressing Duke everywhere. When you have guys like Chris Gray, like Michael Sowers, and great team offenses where they're just that deep, you can. And Duke did the same thing to Syracuse, coming out and pressing our mids everywhere. You would think the opposite. You would think, and I used to make this mistake as a coach. You'd think, hey, let's stay home. Let's not go out and press these athletes that are going to beat us. And that's going to be better for us because then we can stay home and get in our slide packages. But actually, the opposite ends up being true. If you stay home, you get hurt worse because then you get caught in your half rotations and then they can pick you apart left and right. Whereas if you go out and press, the guy gets beat early. Sometimes the guy, when you're pressing, is getting beat before he even gets to the box line. You can get that slide there almost immediately, rotate everyone else halfway. The Dodgers still too far away from the play to really sling passes across the defense into the backside because you're all spread out and so far apart with sticks upfield. So the defenders have a lot more reaction time to get their sticks up on a pass that might come their way. So I think that Richmond's defense was I don't want to say the sleeping on it thing, but anyone who said that High Point was going to win this game because of Asher Nolting was, in fact, sleeping on Richmond's defense. So there's that. And then I heard a lot of people that Richmond, and one of the things I did want to say was if you were one of those people that said Richmond lacked star power and that, High Point has Asher Nolting, who the hell does Richmond have? You're an idiot as well. Because, Richmond has lots of dudes here. And as we kind of look at the star power for Richmond, one person, and who was it here? It was Drew Koch over in the College Lacrosse discussion forum. He said Dalton Young. I don't know if Drew is a Richmond fan or just like me watches a boatload of lacrosse, but he talked about how Dalton Young has been huge for the Spiders. Sophomore attackman, 21-6 over the season so far. He goes 6-2 in this game against High Point. That was huge. Ryan Lanchberry. We're talking about Richmond lacking star power was what Twitter was saying. Ryan Lanchberry, another pimp for Richmond, 3-4. On the day, he followed up his 12-point outing with a 7-point outing in a huge game against High Point. So this kid is the truth, and he's one of the huge reasons that Richmond is going to own the SoCon in the end. But then there's supporting cast: Richie Connell, Tyler Schultz, Luke Graham, and I always want to say Luke Graham's name like Graham because it's spelled Grayyum. So I just want to kind of really overemphasize the yum on the end of it for some reason. But those guys are all beasts. So, Richmond Richmond is far better than High Point in terms of their top 6 guys. And I dare say that Asher Nolting has actually had a rough season so far. Between his turnovers, the lack of production in big games like this, and I don't put it on Asher Nolting as much as I just put it on High Point just doesn't have the depth. High Point's defense is awful, and Richmond's better. And I think that Richmond's going to walk their way to a SoCon win and get themselves into the tournament. And High Point, at this point, High Point's going to have a hard time finishing 500. We're not even sure if High Point's the second best team in the SoCon yet, although I think by the end of it, they probably will be. And then Richmond has UVA next, so it'll be really interesting to see Richmond versus UVA. They hung well with UNC. Duke beat them up a little bit, but defensively, they still didn't play that bad. I think they lost to Duke 13-6, so still they held Duke back a little bit offensively. They just couldn't put it together themselves offensively against Duke. So I think that Richmond, hopefully they put up a good showing here against UVA. All right, back to questions again. Leland was talking about number 35. I agree. He's just been, listen, I believe in the kid. I think the kid is going to be a solid short stick D mid for Cuse. You're lying if we didn't notice, that he was kind of a weak link in that Duke game a little bit. Maybe. I don't think that he'll hear this. I often just assume players never watch anything that I say. I know I get a lot of parents and lacrosse fans. I doubt that players pay attention, but I always feel a little bit bad when I chirp a player. So if you are a player and I chirp you, please chirp me privately. I'll never mention it. I do talk to a lot of players privately here on between Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. But if I've called you out and you feel slighted, by all means, hit me up. Let's talk about it. Dalton Young, number 23 for Richmond. Ty Stevens, I think 23 for Richmond is Connell, isn't it? I don't have their roster in front of me. Yeah, Richie Connell. Someone said that. I'm taking Notre Dame over UVA today. I would too. I like that one. We're going to talk about that one a little bit. Who was it? Was it Kyle Holmes said that? I agree with him. And Richmond makes noise come tourney time from Ty Stevens. I agree. Kid Trunks also thinks Notre Dame over UVA, especially because of the faceoffs. I mean, Notre Dame is just murking people at the faceoff dot. They got two guys that are hovering at 70%. And when you have two faceoff guys that are equally good and that are equally as consistent as Leonard and Gallagher have been for Notre Dame, that's dangerous, man. And then offensively, they're not the best offensive team in the ACC, but they're not the worst. And then you have their defense, which is good. And I don't have it in front of me, but Lacrosse Reference on Twitter. If you don't follow Lacrosse Reference on Twitter, you should, because they have these ridiculous stats that they just put up here and there. And now I'm getting the emails post game that are incredible, but they have this chart that shows where teams sit defensively and offensively. And Syracuse is in a good spot. They're better than average offensively, better than average defensively. Duke is the best overall because Duke is the best offensively and defensively when you kind of put the average in there. UNC's right below them. They're a little bit better offensively than Duke, but a lot worse defensively than Duke. So by their chart, it really does look like the race for the ACC is Duke, UNC kind of at the top, partly just because Duke beat Syracuse here. Then I think it's Cuse and Notre Dame right below them. UVA has some work to do to weasel back into it. Wyatt raised by Wolves. I think Richmond could take UVA. They're not playing team offense right now. On a different note, some of the best checks this season have come from Chase Scanlon and Hiltz. Hiltz had in his first game that he started, he had a couple of really nice takeaway checks as well. All right, what time is it? I'm pressed for time here today because I got to hard stop this bad boy at 11. Hofstra and Fairfield. Won't talk about this one a lot, but still worthy of some mention. Ryan Tierney, he continues to be a beast in the sense that he puts up 5 goals and a dish in their 15-7 win over Fairfield. And then beyond Sowers, Gray, and Bernhardt, I've been saying that I think that the only other real guy that I think it's hard to tell who's going to be the 5 finalists. Sowers and Gray, no-brainers. Bernhardt, no-brainer. Who are going to be the other 2 Tewaaraton finalists? I feel like if Tierney keeps putting up the points he's putting up, he's going to be a finalist, but he'll be a finalist that probably has no real shot at winning because he's just putting up a bunch of points, playing a much weaker schedule than what these other guys that are above him end up putting up. And then who's going to be that 5th guy ends up being the next question. I mean, I guess it probably depends on where teams are sitting come the end of the season, but could someone like a Rayfus weasel into that top spot, that 5th spot for the Tewaaraton race, especially assuming Cuse, handles their business and wins a bunch more ACC games and he continues to play well? Maybe. I hope that that's the case here. But Hofstra, they continue to look good. Ryan Tierney is filthy. Everybody knows it, and that's going to be good stuff for him. So let me bring up the schedule here. So the big game today, and I didn't bring the schedule up, but it's the Notre Dame UVA. UVA sitting at 6-2, Notre Dame sitting at 4-0. UVA's played some teams. Their 2 losses are to Syracuse and to UNC. Notre Dame has played nobody, but I like Notre Dame in this game. Pat Cavanaugh, 7-19 so far over their first game. So he's got 26 points over 4 games. Griffin Westland is excellent, 5-7. Quinn McCann, 9-2. So Notre Dame doesn't have the huge names that UVA does, but UVA's defense, they're susceptible to getting beat, and they're susceptible to getting beat off ball because they play pretty aggressive. And Pat Cavanaugh's a really good attackman to have in those types of matchups there. And then in terms of defense, I think Notre Dame's defense can handle the Virginia offense. The problem for Virginia and the key to this game is going to be the faceoff dot. Petey LaSala, very formidable faceoff guy. What's going to have to happen is I don't presume LaSala is going to win more than 40% of the draws. If LaSala can win 40% of the draws, that's a win for UVA in that area, especially because LaSala doesn't usually just win draws. He often runs up the field and gets a goal and an assist. So even if LaSala wins less than 40%, if he can go 1-1 on the day, score a goal and get an assist, giddy up. That's going to be better. So that's going to be interesting to watch, is how does LaSala and company handle Notre Dame's face-off duo. Best face-off duo in the country thus far, by far. Not even close. And that's going to be key in that game. And then in terms of goalies, overall, Entenmann has played very well for Notre Dame. Entenmann right now is sitting at 70% in cage in terms of his save percentage, which is really high. But once again, Notre Dame has played no one of note yet, whereas Alex Rode at 54%. But Alex Rode's played tough too, so the goalie battle will be interesting to watch too. I'd give the slight edge to Notre Dame. So if you look at it overall offensively, UVA has the better offense hands down. You look at midfield and midfield depth, I like UVA's midfielders a little bit better, but then you look at Notre Dame defensively, as good if not better. In the cage, I think Notre Dame's a little bit better overall, at least how Entenmann's been playing. And then at the faceoff dot is where that's the real equalizer for Notre Dame and where they can really turn the tides here on UVA. Another game worth watching, and is it worth watching? I'm not sure, but you got Loyola Towson here playing today as well. Towson's 4-2, Loyola's 2-5, but it's always a hotly contested matchup here, and it's being played at Towson. And they have not played yet here. Loyola's losses are to Virginia and Lehigh, and I didn't like the Lehigh loss, but Lehigh is a really good team, and so that's going to be a good game. That'll be interesting to watch. Olmsted and company taking them on. Another big game, I think this one is today, is Michigan and Ohio State. And right now, Ohio State sitting at 2-3 in the bag, and Michigan at 1-4, but Michigan coming off a big win over, who was it, Penn State that they beat last week. So that's going to be big for them. And Michigan, kind of coming in hopefully with a little bit of momentum against a hated rival. So that'll be a big game. We want Josh Zawada to play big. Bryce Clay's been big for them. So, and then you got the whole trio for Ohio State of Jack Myers, LeClaire, and Hughes. They'll just have to win some faceoffs. Ohio State will, and Michigan's just going to have to do what they did last week. Hustle like crazy all over the field, be opportunistic, and score points when you're given opportunities. That's going to be a big game as well. Let me just get to the calendar, and then I'll rip through these in a little bit more of a sequence. I'm going to hit questions again real quick. All right, no more. Can you imagine a world where every team in the ACC makes the tournament? Yes, I think that's a very possible thing. I don't know how the tournament is going to shake out, but I think if you don't have the Ivy already playing, and usually 3 or 4 ACC teams make it anyway. So absolutely, I think all 5 ACC teams are going to be more than likely make the tournament because they will be deserving, especially once you get into the RPI scores. It will be a no-brainer. All 5 ACC teams, I presume, as long as none of those ACC teams end up going like 0-5. If UVA goes 0-5 in conference, and then they just won all their non-conference games, and maybe that makes it a little shaky. But even if one of the ACC teams goes 0-5, as long as they're not getting blown out by everybody, they still could end up making the tournament. What are some other good games being played today beyond those? We have Hobart and Sacred Heart. Kind of feels like a must-win for Hobart because they play a limited schedule, so they kind of have to win their conference games to have a shot. So that's a big game for Hobart today. We got Albany playing Stony Brook. I like Albany in this one, but Stony Brook, I thought early in the season Stony Brook was going to be the best team in the America East Conference. It does not look like that's going to end up being the case, but they did just beat UMass Lowell. They beat New Jersey Tech. They lost to Hofstra by a reasonable margin, but they got smoked by Sacred Heart and Bryant. So it's hard to tell which Sacred Heart team's going to show up. So I do like Albany in this game, but that's another one to watch. And then tomorrow's games, the Big Cat, Maryland at Rutgers. You can make the argument this might be the biggest game of the weekend, although I'm really excited to see the UVA and the Notre Dame game, but the rematch between Maryland and Rutgers is huge. And this kind of seals the deal here for Maryland. If Maryland can beat Rutgers on the road at their place tomorrow, then Maryland kind of has a clear road to winning the big, and their path to the tournament is solidified here. We also have Hopkins at Penn State, and then another big one here in the Patriot, Bucknell and Navy. Bucknell at Navy. I think that is a remake for their game that had gotten rescheduled earlier in the year. And that is the games. Let's see what's being played in the D2 world on their calendar. All right, here. This is harder to spot some of the games that might be good. Wait a minute. Oh, I hit D3 by accident here. Let me hit questions again. About to go watch Providence, Denver as soon as this ends. Yeah, I'm going to end it. I was going to sit here and talk about some D2, D3 action, but I've already been rambling here for, 50 minutes almost? Yeah, 46 minutes. So we're going to call it. I will be back tomorrow morning for the recap show. Recap show tomorrow morning. It should hit about 10:30 or so once I get it recorded and cut up and everything like that. We're going to talk about all the D1 games that are worthy of being mentioned, and I'm going to try each week to get into at least 2 or 3 D2 and D3 games as well. So we'll talk about all that crap, and then, that's it. That's it. I'm going to stop rambling here. No more questions. 22 viewers, 170 people hit this bad boy up so far through the whole thing. So still successful. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for hitting me up with questions. I'm not sick anymore, and I'm ready to come back and just pop this stuff out. As I said, the schedule for this week, Sunday's game, or tomorrow, we got the recap show for all the games that take place today. Monday, we'll put out another film review. Those are some videos that we're going to do every Monday. We're going to put out a film review where it's more of a improving lacrosse IQ. I'm not trying to go out and do what some of these other guys do, where they're really breaking down plays and strategy and things of that sort. Mine's more of a general, hey, look at this. Here's guys beating dudes underneath, and here's the mechanics that go into that. So for anybody who has players that they're, any coaches that are watching, we're going to do it every Monday. Put a new one out. If you go to LaxFactor.com, we already have a kind of instructional, or I forget what it's called on our website. I'm looking at it. Strategy section of the website where we have all our film review videos up there. I don't cuss in those, so they are safe for the kids. If you have some younger kids going into it, they'll always be family friendly. Just make sure they're not clicking on the podcast, because I have been known to drop some, fucks and asses and all that crap into the podcast here and there. Sometimes even where it's not even worthy, like I just did there. So that is it, everybody. I will be back tomorrow morning. Join me then. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and